Before we begin today's podcast episode of Romance on the Rocks, we have to offer you our very sincere apologies for the audio quality that you're about to hear. We are still new at this whole podcasting thing, and, well, this episode just seemed cursed when we kept trying to record it. We want to assure you, though, that we've worked out all the kinks, and moving forward after this episode, the audio quality will be great. We thank you for your patience and understanding, and we hope you'll enjoy this show regardless of the audio quality issues.
I'm Megan Lee.
And I'm Nicole Danielle.
And this is Romance on the Rocks, where two bookish biddies imbibe.
Thank you for joining us for another scandalous episode of Romance on the Rocks. We like to start out our episodes with a cocktail. Megan, what are you drinking this evening?
Well, I'm trying to go on theme because tonight I am reading a book about, well, not about, but set in Tennessee. So I have got a beverage made with Old Smoky, Gatlinburg, Tennessee, salty watermelon whiskey, and I am drinking it out of a mason jar. So I'm feeling like I'm on point. And how about you, dear?
I am drinking a quintessential Southern drink, according to the internet, called a dark and stormy.
Oh, I like those.
Yeah, I felt it was appropriate given that there's a hurricane and a tornado right now in North Carolina. I've never had one before, but I think it would be great for someone who loves a Moscow Mule because there is ginger beer, a little bit of lime, and then instead of the usual, vodka in a Moscow Mule, this has dark black rum.
Yeah, I like a dark and stormy. Those are nice.
I'm kind of digging it, actually.
I think it's a great choice for today. So we've got dark and stormy, we've got some salty watermelon whiskey, and we've got two books that were set in the South.
Yes, that we originally thought our universal or combining theme was going to be the music scene.
Yeah, we definitely thought that. My book is called Heart of Nashville and literally has a gentleman on the front with a big guitar. So I was like, clearly this is about music. And yours was called
Bluegrass King, which I assumed was about bluegrass music, but it's not.
No, we might have had our blinders on a little bit because we were excited that both books sounded like they matched.
This is actually about the horse racing scene. We were a little off there, but I still feel like they kind of go together, and we'll talk about that more as we go.
Yeah, well, I mean, they are both set in the South, and, you know, they involve romance to one degree or another.
There we go. We are going to do our trigger warning, as we do if the book calls for it. For my book, I definitely have a trigger warning for sexual assault. Do you have any trigger warnings for yours, Megan?
I would say that my trigger warning probably falls under the same category, and I will also add that there is some substance abuse in my book as well.
So I believe you are up first, my lady.
My book is called Heart of Nashville. It's written by Robert Vaughn, who I believe is our first male author. And the note on the front of the book says, "A novel of shameless passion and instant fortune." This book was written in 1975 and set in Tennessee. And the back of the book states, "Inside Music City, USA, armed with big dreams, fast tunes, and battered guitars, hundreds of hopefuls arrive daily in Nashville, Tennessee, ready to gamble their souls away for instant fortune and fame. This is the sizzling story of 5 country music stars competing for the coveted Entertainer of the Year award. They slash their names in gold across the Nashville sky, only to discover that their flashy backstage world has become a tangled nightmare of lust, intrigue, and spotlit tragedy." The premise of this book is what you just heard. It is some music folks who are getting ready for this upcoming ceremony for Country Music Entertainer of the Year. You get introduced almost immediately to a character named Buck Campbell. He's known as country music's warmest personality. quite the thing to be called. I will say he puts on a good front for fans, but is well known to be really difficult to deal with behind the scenes. He's pretty much an asshole. Most people think that Buck Campbell is the most likely candidate to win this competition, but all the others have favorable reasons to think that they may pull an upset. One of those possible underdogs that may take the prize from Buck Campbell is Sarah Macon. She was a small-time folk singer who exploded onto the scene with a song called My World is Fallen Apart. Like the title of this song, her world is also falling apart. So this book never really gives any sort of clear diagnosis for her, but it seems to me that she probably suffers from depression, social anxiety, generalized anxiety, all that at a minimum. She's in a complicated marriage and has turned to heroin to cope. So that is a little bit of a difficult one. Although I will say throughout the book, she's probably one of the characters that I felt most drawn to because you could really feel the undercurrents of her character and how complex she could have been. I appreciated her. Sarah's hit song was written by a nobody named Lucky Bertram. Lucky is a severe alcoholic who is so dysfunctional in this book that at one point his sister goes to court to try and have him declared her ward. And he's like 37, I think. So it's pretty bad. When he initially wrote the song that Sarah is now up for this award for, this big music executive had heard it and promised to come back with a contract for Lucky because he liked the song so much and just knew it was going to be a hit. But by the time the exec got back, Lucky had already sold the song for $150, which he blew on a 2-day drinking binge. Now, in today's money, this is what I was thinking. I'm like, okay, this book was written in 1975. I can totally see $150 being blown in a 2-day drinking binge today.
Sure.
If I go to the right bar, absolutely, yeah. Right? But that was 1975 money. So I went back and I found an inflation calculator.
Ooh, yes.
Because I was super curious. Lucky sold that song in today's money for $877.68. Nice. That is not a lot of money to sell a really big hit song for.
Right.
But it's also a lot of money to waste on a 2-day drinking binge, if that says anything about the problems he's having.
So I'm like, either he was going through entire bottles of something or he was getting champagne service circa the 70s.
I mean, $900 worth of bottles in 2 days, that is some top shelf stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I kind of feel like, given what I know about him in the book, he's not a top shelf kind of guy. So I'm just not sure about that. But anyway, Lucky told the executive when the executive got back, and was just shocked that the song was gone and gone for such a pittance. He said, "You had a promise. The other guy had money." Because of this, Lucky is now up for the songwriting award, but has zero else to show for his efforts, kind of living a slummy life.
Okay.
Karen Young is the personal assistant for that music exec who had wanted to get the contract to Lucky. She has been sent to drag Lucky to this award ceremony. The exec hopes that getting Lucky there will have him get more connections in the industry, and it'll allow for future contracts and perhaps a better income or a better outcome. When Karen gets there to pick him up, he is trashed. According to the landlord, Lucky drinks because, quote unquote, he's a sensitive soul. People like that aren't equipped to cope with the realities of life without some sort of shield.
Oh boy. Okay.
Uh-huh. And so he is passed out in the back of his pickup truck, and that's where he stays for the night. The next morning, after he had sobered up, he met up with Karen again and greets her by saying, "Self, that was a purty girl done come down here from Nashville to fetch you." And then I said to myself, well, how would you know? You were probably too boozed up to tell. But here I am, disgustingly sober, and you are still pretty. Golden tongue. He's got a golden tongue.
Oh, for sure.
Uh-huh. While Karen is trying to wrangle up this slop of a man, elsewhere in Nashville, we get to see the relationship between Jimmy Scott and Judy Monroe, both of whom are also up for this same coveted award. Jimmy is what we would call nowadays a Nepo baby. His father was a legendary country singer who lost his life playing Russian roulette some years prior. And Jimmy is a talented man in his own right, a lot to be proud of in his career. However, he is also having an affair with Judy Monroe, who is referred to as a nymphomaniac and is well known for having slept with nearly every bangable person in the industry.
Okay. So she's done some things. Okay.
She's seen a few things.
Yeah.
Our intro to them starts with, "Hi, Judy," Jimmy said. She responds with, P.S. This is on the phone. She responds with, "I'm lying in bed and I have nothing on, JR. I'm as naked as a jaybird. Would you like to come spend some time with me? Let me finish the drink I have and I'll be right over. Oh, darling, bring me a daiquiri. Bring me lots of daiquiris."
I love a daiquiri,
I do too. I can't blame her. I appreciate that she was getting, her love life and her booze life all served up to her in her room.
There you go.
Exactly. While those two are enjoying each other's company, we also get introduced to Roy Daniels and Virginia. We come to find out that Roy and our most likely to win, Buck Campbell, have previously entered into an unsavory contract with some New York mobster types. Apparently, the group funded a lot of Roy's early salary as a manager with Buck and brought them into a lot of popular venues, pushing Buck's career forward with a lot of force and a lot of their money. Because of this, the mobsters see winning this Entertainer of the Year award as some sort of payday. They know that Buck's album sales will increase, and this will be another stepping stone to his stardom, and it'll bring in more profits. So the mobsters send goons to oversee the awards ceremony and decide to leave nothing up to chance.
How much are they influencing or impacting the results of the contest?
Oh, you would think that it would be difficult to do, but this book makes it sound like they're really trying. And he's already favored to win, right? So they're going out of their way for this. So the mobsters show up. Now we've got all these country music people and we've got mobsters. The mobsters kidnap the young daughter of the ceremony's president, and they also plant a bomb at the Grand Ole Opry where the ceremony is going to take place. And then the president is basically told, if you don't ensure that Buck wins, a lot of people are going to get hurt or die, to include your daughter. At this point, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to spoil the ending of this book.
That is so unlike you, though, because you normally love to spoil a book.
Yeah. This was one of those books where it took me a while to really figure out how to streamline the plot. There were so many couples, and I haven't even touched on all the couples. And it's not even a very long book. This was a really quick read. 224 pages, but there were so many characters that to keep it understandable while explaining it just wasn't worth getting into at all. So if somebody wanted to read this to find out what happens, I haven't spoiled much. That being said, I do have a list of things that I found disturbing and or problematic.
Okay.
I have a list of things I found promising and or sweet. And then just kind of some extraneous stuff.
Okay.
So what would you like to hear first, Nicole? Do you want to hear problematic? Do you want to hear sweet?
Let's go problematic first.
Okay. Problematic stuff. I'm going to start by saying there's about 2 pages where Karen and Lucky go to get him some new clothing because, again, he's a he's got problems, and he did not come prepared to this ceremony. He came pretty sloppy, and they need to find him something appropriate to wear. So they go to a high-end clothing store where they are served by a man who is homosexual. And there's some mocking of this man's behaviors and mannerisms. Found that unsettling, but kind of in keeping for 1975. I did not care for the fact that they used the word frigid to describe a woman who was disinterested in a sexual relationship, because most of the women in this book were just jumping in the sack. And so the fact that the one character in this book who was hesitant to be involved in a sexual relationship, well, clearly she's frigid. That's, again, kind of unsettling, especially when we know so much more nowadays about people who are asexual and fall just in different parts of the, sexual spectrum. Did not care for that. There's also a very big age gap relationship, and we've talked about the age gap relationships before. In general, I do not have any issues with the age gap relationships if they are treated respectfully.
Sure.
I did not care for this. Quote, after Linda had a couple of orgasmic convulsions and had fallen forward to nibble on Ken's neck, he felt himself ejaculating into the child woman before him.
Ew. Gross.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Yeah. They at one point, he asks her how old she is, and her response is 1 month over the age of consent. There's so much wrong with that.
Yeah.
So much. That was problematic. There's also a passage where we learn that marriage fixes everything. And that's another theme that we've found in our last few books, right?
Yeah.
In this case, we're going back to Sarah Macon, the one that I said had a lot of mental health issues. And apparently the doctor says that what's going to fix her mental health issues is getting married.
Oh.
Doctor says, yeah.
Okay.
Miss Macon is a very frightened young woman. I suspect that she is badly out of her element. She's never adjusted to the change in her environment. She needs something steady, something she can cling to. The solution is obvious. Marry her. Perhaps with a husband, she'll be able to make the adjustment. That's going to fix everything.
Of course.
There's also some really unsettling treatment of drug overdose in the book that I'm not even going to get into. And probably to me, the most disturbing thing in this book is with Jimmy and his wife. This is a little quote in this section. Jimmy didn't know how much longer he could live with himself, how much longer he could face the daily guilt of knowing that while his wife was sitting at home in complete trust and fidelity, he was out whoring around. That in and of itself was bad, but coupled with Lynn's condition was surely twice as bad of a sin. Lynn was dying. The doctor had given her less than 1 year to live, and Lynn didn't know. She thought her weakened, always tired condition was the result of some temporary deficiency, but Jimmy knew, and he had known from the start. And he had not told Lynn because he didn't want her to have to face the knowledge of a certain death. I'm sorry. He knows she's dying, but she doesn't? And this is okay as a medical practice for the doctor to tell your husband.
But not you.
She's dying. Yeah.
I'm curious as to whether that's actually a common thing in the 70s, because it surely violates all sorts of HIPAA these days,
Yeah, these days. That is a really good question. When did that transition happen? Because I do feel like that was probably fairly common at one point where, well, he's in charge, so we'll tell him, and it's up to him to let her know. So somewhere that had to have changed. But yeah, that to me was the worst part of the book. I read that and it just made me feel icky all over. Did not like.
Yeah, I don't like that either. Like, you're just living in oblivion. And oh my God, there's probably like gaslighting associated with it too, right? She's probably like, Why do I feel so crappy all the time? I feel like I'm dying. Oh no, you're fine.
Oh, you'll feel better next week. Just drink this tonic. Have this concoction. These pills will help. I don't know, man. That was really icky. And then the last thing that I found really, really, really disturbing. Judy Monroe. We met her earlier. She's the one having an affair with Jimmy Scott. And overall, I have a lot of good things to say about how they treated the sexuality of these women. But in this particular one, I'm going to do a lot of quoting here. Judy had always been a sensualist. While still a very young girl, she had discovered the feelings of pleasure she could evoke just by touching herself in the right spot. She stood there grandly and beautifully out in the fields, stripped of all her clothing. It felt good to stand in the breeze. How much more delightful would it be to run? To run naked down the rows and just let the leaves slap against her skin. So this is her basically just being young and impetuous. She just drops all her clothing in the middle of this big field because nobody can see her and she's just going to run around in the sun. Get it, girl. However, she gets back to her pile of clothing and there are two local guys standing there, teenagers. And one says to her, I told you if we just wait around a spell, whoever shucked out of them clothes would come back. He started to undo his belt and slip off his pants. I'm just going to get me a little of this fine ass, he said. Bet it's going to be better than a stump-broke heifer. First off, are we saying that he's humping cows?
Yeah, that's my instant question from that.
That's kind of what I heard. Now it just gets worse. The truth was, Judy wanted to do it. I'm sorry, this man is threatening to assault you, and he just said he likes to assault cows, and you want to do this with him? Okay.
Yeah.
She had thought of it during those times that she played with herself, and she wondered how it would be. She didn't want to do it with any of her brothers, because she was afraid they would tell her pa. And besides, none of them really appealed to her.
Well, that's probably for the best.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Despite Troy's blundering, Judy enjoyed it. From then on, Judy let word drift out that she'd be willing to lie with anyone willing to pay the cash for it. And although she enjoyed the sex, she also enjoyed the money because it represented a dream to her. Every cent Judy made was put away, stuffed in tin cans and buried. For almost 5 years, Judy stashed away bills and coins and the occasional piece of jewelry. And then the day after her 19th birthday, she dug it all up, counted it, stuck it in her purse, and left home for good. I have so many problems with everything leading up to that ending.
Yeah.
I am all for you earning money to get yourself out of a bad situation. I understand that sometimes all you've got is you. However, the leading up to it, I feel like I can tell this was a male author, if that makes sense.
No, I agree with you.
So those were my problematic things. But then I had things that I found promising or sweet. Sarah and Lucky, so the folk singer and the songwriter, they bond over that song that he wrote that made her famous and made him nothing. And really for both of them, that was probably the worst thing that could have happened. She did not need to be famous. He probably needed some money. They go back to her hotel room together and absolutely no hanky-panky happens. He just holds her hand and she falls asleep.
Oh, that's
very
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was very nice. Jimmy and Judy have a difficult base for a relationship since he is lying to his wife and they are cheating. However, they really seem to care about each other at a really deep level. She offers to step away if that would make things better or easier. They talk about the fact that he loves his wife, but he loves Judy, and they're just not sure what to do about it. I thought it was a nice way to treat a complicated situation instead of it being really clear-cut. You can see how things get muddied.
Sure.
Judy, Virginia, and Linda, 3 of the women in this book, were all overtly sexual, and all 3 of them, plus Karen, the 4th woman in this book who has some sexual escapades, they're all allowed to be vocal about what they want, and none of them are shamed for doing any of those things. Judy, yes, had the nymphomaniac title attached to her, but she personally inflated that and made it part of her public persona.
Right.
She ran with it. She claimed it as her own. And I liked the fact that there wasn't any slut shaming.
Yeah, for sure. Because if a guy did it, no one would give a crap.
Exactly. And in this book, it almost seemed like most of the power was given to the women when it came to the sexual encounters. There wasn't a lot of what women would typically expect when it comes to romance and, sensual things happening before just throwing that hot dog down the hallway. Which is why I'm saying I felt like you could tell it was written by a man.
Yeah. Are you saying there was no foreplay, Meg?
I'm saying there was very little of any of that. It was mostly like she walked in, he was sprung, she jumped on it.
He brought some daiquiris, they went to town.
Yeah, there was very little, like, he kissed her shoulder, he gently, undid some buttons. None of that.
Yeah.
There was just nothing like that. But in all the situations, the women were put in a power role, and that was nice to see. Like I said, there was no slut shaming.
Yeah.
So there was a lot to dislike about this book, and there was a lot to appreciate about this book.
For sure. They have their own sexual power. That's good.
There also was a super funny description of sex that I would like to read to you if you are open to it.
Please share.
Lucky felt himself penetrating her deeply, massaging the lubricated inner walls of her womanly passage. Then he felt the tiny tingling, which began deep inside and went pinwheeling out, spinning faster and faster until every cell in his body was caught up in the gigantic vortex of the sexual centrifuge. I just thought there was so many fun words in one little place.
Vortex and centrifuge.
This book also has an advertisement, because that has become my thing.
Yes.
And this one is for Kent cigarettes.
Again with the ciggies.
Yeah, Kent cigarettes on one side and True cigarettes on the other. The True cigarettes is perhaps my favorite, because this guy is in really cool plaid pants that I would very much wear today. He's sitting next to his golf bag, and he's on a bench that looks like he's in a YMCA locker room while he's smoking.
Okay.
Pretty great. And last but not least, there is a chase scene involving golf carts. I know in my head, in the same way that I see that scene from Club Dread, where she's like trying to get away on the golf cart.
Oh my God.
And the book is very heavy on pubic hair because it is the 70s. Ew. So if anybody's into that, this might be the book for you.
All the bush, all the time.
Just remember, if you are interested in this book, I have not spoiled anything.
True.
I will tell you there are 3 deaths and a bomb explosion.
Wow.
If you're interested in the drama and the explosions, perhaps you should read this pubic hair book. That is what I got for you, Nicole.
So
I'm not sure if I can even call this a romance novel.
Okay,
this is where we get stuck in the weeds.
Yeah, I was just about to say, at first hearing of the tale, my gut reaction is like, this really isn't a romance novel. But I will say, just because you and I have the perspective of traditional romance or whatever, I just feel like this is a more male perspective, because there is romance happening between the various couples. So
there definitely are, and there are relationships that are a little bit deeper than I would have expected, just given how quick this book is.
Yeah.
And you can see that these couples, well, one in particular, clearly clearly love each other and are really there to support each other. So it's not what I would call a traditional romance novel. Right. There is romance there. There's definitely sex in it. How's your drink looking? Do we need to take a break to refill?
Yeah, we're going to take a little break to refill our bevies, and then we'll be back with my book. Want to show some love for Romance on the Rocks podcast? It's easy. Visit www.buymeacoffee.com/romanceontherocks. Buy us a book or 2. We appreciate you, and thanks for listening. My book is Bluegrass King by Janet Daly. Originally published in 1977, so we've got kind of like a 70s theme going on.
Yeah. Our themes are matching up.
Yeah, and mine is set in Louisville, Kentucky.
Good old Louisville.
Louisville. I love Louisville.
I do too. So,
Kentucky is a great state.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the focus of this Americana collection that Janet Daly does, is she does a book for each state. So this is the state of Kentucky for this book.
Very good.
And as you witnessed during our recent book shopping adventure, I did not grab all 50 states, but damn near close.
You did your best. I feel like you got about half.
Well, and there were some states I had zero interest in, and then other states that I wanted that I couldn't find. And at a certain point, I couldn't even carry them all in my arms anymore, so I had to call it good.
You gave it a good try, though. Like, watching you walk around with that armload of books was pretty impressive.
I definitely had my arms loaded, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So the official description of this little romance ditty. Dani Williams has always resented wealthy, self-confident Barrett King, the scion of blue blood Kentucky family. Barrett is used to the best of everything, while Dani and her horse trainer father struggle to get by. But now they own the Rogue, a thoroughbred racehorse Dani is sure will be a champion. Finally, she'll get to show Barrett that he can't always win. But there's no such thing as a sure thing on the racetrack or in love. And when tragedy strikes for Dani, Barrett's sincere caring threatens to reveal a devastating truth. Her resentment masks an aching desire for the almost impossibly handsome man. But if she unchains her heart, will Barrett welcome her into his world of Kentucky privilege? And could she ever belong?
Could she? I look forward to finding out.
Right? I was super excited because this was a nice quick read, as was yours. And I honestly appreciated that. I really needed something quick and easy to read that wasn't too cerebral. And Bluegrass King sort of gave that to me. But there were some troubling themes in this romance novel.
I feel like that is across the board what we have run into so far with pretty much every one of our novels.
And admittedly, we've been reading some old school ones so far. A different time, a sweeter time, as my mom would say. Yeah, let's get to know our two main characters a little bit. We have Dani, short for Danielle. She's had an unusual upbringing. Her mother abandoned her and her father when she was a young child and then died in a car accident when Dani was about 12. She's been raised by her father, Lou, and she's spent most of her life in horse stables and racetracks. Lou used to be a jockey and now owns his own racehorses. Dani is now 19 and looks and acts every bit a tomboy. Their star horse is the Rogue. Then we have Barrett King, and Dani has known Barrett King for many years, and he also owns racehorses and is a friend of her father's. She, however, hates him because he once tried to buy the Rogue from them, and is the kind of guy who typically gets what he wants in life because he's wealthy, attractive, has good charisma. His star horse of the moment is Easy Does It. So the story opens with the lot of them gathered for horse training. The Rogue is recovering from a recent injury and is now ready to get back into the races. Dani mouths off to Barrett, and for funsies, they decide to have a little impromptu race between their horses. Terrible fucking idea. The Rogue was not as healed as they all thought, and he's re-injured so badly that he ends up having to be put down. Which is seriously awful.
That's terrible.
I was kind of bummed about that part too, because I've seen like the movie about Seabiscuit, and I'm pretty sure they let Seabiscuit live. So I was super bummed that they were like, oh no, we're putting this horse down straight up.
And horses are fragile. I give folks a lot of credit who can deal with horses. I don't know, man. I could not do it.
Well, Dani really loved her horse, and she has a very public meltdown when the rogue has to be euthanized. She actually tries to physically attack Barrett because she thinks he's to blame for what's happened, you know.
Oh, come on, girl.
I know, like, you're the one who was mouthing off and like, fine, let's race our horses. It wasn't his idea. It was her freaking idea. So,
you took your treasured horse and pushed it past its... Oh, God. Okay, continue.
So she blames him and ultimately ends up passing out from all the emotions and mental anguish she's feeling. And there ends up being several images caught on camera of Dani attacking Barrett, her passing out, him carrying her in his arms to get her away from the paparazzi and get her medical attention. And those are published in the local newspaper, all these pictures. Dani wakes up in a special hospital and her father tells her he's leaving the industry and her because he feels he's a failure both as a racehorse owner and father. Of course, Lou, that totally makes sense. He's going to New York and he makes her promise that she'll stay away from horses as well and find a better future in a different career path, and he hopes she'll become a proper young lady. He gives her a wad of cash and pieces out.
So easy to become a proper young lady when you have neither of your parents to guide you.
Also,
good call, Lou.
They've been living on the road. He literally just abandons her in Louisville. Like, here's a wad of cash.
Great.
Bye. Well, in the hospital, Dani is also visited by a man named Marshall Thompson, who is a society columnist for one of the newspapers. She's never met him before, but for some reason tells him every detail about her father and says he'll help her become a model with his connections, and she can pay him back for his investments in her when she starts earning money from her new line of work. Because, you know.
Nicole, quick interruption. Did you say that her father was a jockey?
Yeah.
Okay, so she must be so tall that being a model makes sense, right?
No, Megan, actually. Miss Dani's only 5'4", and I double-checked. I did some research, and that is still not the typical height of a print or runway model in the industry, even in the 70s. You still had to be at least like 5'7", 5'8". So, no, she's not model height. But I had a lot of challenges with this plot point in the book. She doesn't even know this guy. But tells him about her father abandoning her and is a complete tomboy who loves horses, but suddenly she's like, yeah, okay, I'll be a model. And I get that her dad wants her to become a lady and have a different future, but this just seemed like such a big stretch, Meg. Especially when she's 5'4".
Well, you know, the J.C. Penney money, she's going to be rolling it. She can be a proper young lady with that.
For sure. I do want to give Dani credit, though, because she's not naive, and she does ask Marshall if he's got any kind of ulterior motives, and if he's going to expect some sex from her. So snaps for Dani for at least asking the smart questions. Marshall claims he doesn't expect her to put out, but admits that Barrett is his lifelong enemy, and essentially says the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so that's why he's going to help her. As she's checking out of the hospital, Barrett comes to see her. He's paid for her medical bills, but she refuses to let him do that and uses her own money instead. She doesn't tell him about her dad abandoning her, but he kind of figures it out on his own. He tries to offer assistance in various ways, but she refuses. So she starts hanging out with Marshall, who puts her up in a fancy apartment, gets her a full makeover, as one does, and hooks her up with a professional photographer so she can start building her portfolio and get modeling gigs. Now here's where things get weird. He also starts grooming her, which is super creepy and icky. He insists that she reads certain books and articles and magazines, and he dictates that she needs to listen to certain records, and he controls when and where she eats. He controls her schedule. He's always closely monitoring her about what she's doing and where she is. It just seems like this is all part of preparing her to be something more than just a model, and it really grossed me out.
Yeah, I don't like any of that.
Eventually, he takes her to an upscale party for her debut and is showing her off like arm candy. They run into Barrett at this soiree, and you can tell he and Marshall are definitely antagonizing each other. But Dani's starting to have mixed feelings about Barrett because he isn't the total asshole that she thought he was, and it wasn't really his fault that her horse had to be put down, and she's coming to terms with that. He shows up at her apartment the next day, and they spend the day together doing the sightseeing thing in Louisville. And then this part I actually really enjoyed. He shows up another night with pizza after she's had a super long day of work. And it's actually a really nice moment because he offers to make her a salad and keep the pizza warm so she can shower and unwind. And after they have their dinner, they listen to some albums and they snuggle on the couch. And they even end up sharing a steamy little kiss before he leaves for the night.
Ooh. I mean, that sounds very sweet. I like it.
I did too. And I really wanted to enjoy this little impromptu hangout. But it was also laced with more creepy stuff. Specifically, this little borderline of infantilization and pedophilia. At various points, there are discussions of how Barrett thought she was 15 and thinks of her as a girl or a child. There's another spot in the book how he says he's old enough to be her father, and he threatens to spank her on multiple occasions.
You know, I feel like that was a thing in a lot of horror books.
There is a moment where he tells her he doesn't think of her as a child anymore, but then the book also describes how he carries her like a child to bed. It's pretty troubling.
I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't like it either. I also want to point out some other weirdness, because there's more.
Of course.
In your book from episode 1, Beauty Contest Nurse, you mentioned the author had a fascination with teeth.
Yes.
Yes. Well, in this novel, Janet Daly has an obsession with assigning Barrett with descriptors that involve devils and the word satanic and the word hell in reference to his eyes and his smile and other attributes or characteristics throughout the book. It's very bizarre.
Okay, so here's the thing. Like, I understand that there's the term of, like, oh, he was devilishly handsome.
Sure.
But, like, if you just really keep going at it, I feel like you're getting into something a little bit deep and a little bit weird.
Yeah, and it was repeated. It wasn't just like, oh, he had a devilish smile. It was like, Satan danced in his eyes, page whatever. And then another thing was like, he had a hellish grin on another page. And I'm thinking, I can certainly understand using those adjectives and descriptors for a character who is perhaps the villain in a story, but when he's supposed to be your hero, kind of weird.
So, okay, we go from teeth to devil stuff. And I mean, in my book, it was pubic hair. So, you gotta have a thing. There's gotta be a thing, apparently.
Apparently.
Oy, okay. So, what happens with your devil and his girl?
Dani and Barrett basically start dating when she's not working or attending events and such with Marshall. This goes on for about 2 weeks. One night they come back to Dani's apartment after going out for dinner, and Marshall's in her apartment having used a spare key to let himself in. And she didn't know he had the spare key, but he just helped himself in. Can we say creepy fucking stalker?
That is not okay.
Yeah. Obviously, then the two guys get into a verbal fight, and the reason why they're enemies is revealed. Apparently, this is not the first time that Marshall has taken a pretty young thing under his wing to groom into a model. He's done it before with a woman named Melissa, who is the daughter of one of Barrett's friends. But Melissa started banging guys at parties, and Barrett accuses Marshall of having pimped her out to some of these guys. Oh, and Melissa was also Barrett's fiancé.
Ooh, it sounds like Barrett likes to date his friends' daughters.
Yeah, interesting, huh?
Not cool, Marshall.
Don't worry, though. It ended well for Melissa. After their engagement was off, she went to New York to become an actress and actually now legitimately works as an actress both on the stage in theater productions and on television. Soap operas and, made-for-TV movies and whatnot. Both men accuse Dani of siding with the other, but she really just sees things from both sides and keeps trying to diffuse the situation. She empathizes with Barrett about his having lost his fiancé, but she also doesn't necessarily think that Marshall is completely at fault for what happened to Melissa. She holds Melissa accountable for her own actions as well. And,
that's valid.
Yeah, and Dani stands by the fact that she's made her own arrangement with Marshall, and she isn't dumb or naive and has no intentions of being played out in that way. She's modeling because she genuinely believes it's what her dad would want and has promised to leave the horse industry and become a lady, and she thinks this is the best way to do it. I think she's wrong, but... So after this little hot argument, Marshall storms off and Barrett gives Dani a letter he's received from her father. Apparently the two guys have been in contact and Lou knows Barrett is watching out for Dani, and it sounds like Lou is getting back into horse racing in New York and getting his life back together. Which, hey, I'm glad that's happening for Lou, but I don't like that he's basically abandoned his daughter and hasn't made any attempt to communicate with her directly, but he's talking to Barrett?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any freaking sense to me.
Not caring for that either.
Yeah. Barrett then tells Dani, hey, I'm going to be going out of town for a few days. It's my parents' anniversary, but I'll let you know when I'm back in town. Okay, cool. So Marshall and Dani still have a working relationship even after this little fight, and he takes her to one of the la-ti-da social networking parties per usual, and surprise, Barrett is there with another woman.
Oh.
So I gotta say this was some nice manipulation on Marshall's part. He asked Dani if she's surprised to see Barrett there, and she responds with, well, yeah, because he's supposed to be out of town right now. And Marshall lets her know Barrett's been back for several days and asks, didn't you know? And he explains who the woman with Barrett is. That's Nicole Carstairs of Carstairs Steel, the current frontrunner in the race to become Mrs. Barrett King. You didn't actually think you were the only girl he was seeing, did you? I tried to tell you the other night that he was only seeing you because he felt some misguided sense of responsibility towards you, but you didn't believe me, or foolishly didn't want to believe me. Marshall's obviously laying it on pretty thick, and to me, it's obvious that he knew Barrett was going to be back in town and going to be at this party with Miss Carstairs. But I gotta say, I'd be pissed off if I was in Dani's shoes, and I'd probably come to the same conclusions that she does. If I was dating a guy consistently for several weeks and then he tells me he's going to call once he gets back in town after a family thing, but then he totally doesn't call and he's apparently back for days without any communication, then I run into him at a party with another woman, that's not cool in my book. I don't know how you feel about it, Megan, but...
No, that's not okay.
And if I knew this guy was friends with my dad and had openly told me he'd been watching out on behalf of my dad, then yeah, I'm going to start thinking based on all this evidence that maybe this wasn't as serious of a developing relationship as I thought it was.
No, I feel like there are some major trust issues here.
For sure. And communication, lack thereof, issues. So Marshall makes it a point to force Dani to have a conversation and interaction with Barrett and Miss Carstairs, and Barrett's super chill about the whole thing. Acts like everything's peaches and cream. Dani plays it cool because, you know, she doesn't want to look like an idiot at this party. But obviously her heart's stomped on. Her and Marshall leave the party, and just like the master manipulator Marshall is, he asks her to cut Barrett out of her life. She agrees, and the two of them end up kissing. In her mind, she now thinks Barrett wasn't really interested in her as a girlfriend or even a regular friend and was just hanging out with her partly out of duty to her father, but probably mostly to get back at Marshall for what happened with his fiancée, Melissa. And Barrett doesn't reach out to her in any way after the party. So honestly, what else does she have to go on?
Yeah.
So now additional time goes by. So he didn't call her and let her know he was back in town for days. And then he sees her at a party and he's with another woman. And then he doesn't bother to contact her for some more days. And then suddenly one night she's coming home from a night out with Marshall and he busts into her apartment, kind of like forces his way past her when she's opening her apartment door, which I think is icky. And he wants to know what the heck she's doing with Marshall because he thought that they were friends. And she responds, it's not really any of his damn business and she doesn't like him anymore. She likes Marshall better. And now we have some triggering assault shit happen.
No.
Yeah, because the guy went from like, you don't exist to now I'm going to assault you. So he starts aggressively kissing her, even though she does say no. And he basically tells her it would be super easy to take her right then and there. And then says some, and then says some additional gross things that I am not going to repeat because they are that gross. But basically alluding that she's asking for him to assault her. No, dude. She said no. No means no. That was very disappointing, and I did not care for it at all, and it kind of made me mad.
No, that's so wrong. I do find that kind of stuff shows up a lot in these older books.
I don't get it. I don't like it. She tells him to go back to Miss Carstairs. He reveals Miss Carstairs is his future brother-in-law's sister. So his sister is marrying Miss Carstairs' brother. Barrett is like, oh, I thought you knew that that's all she was because I introduced you at the party. And I gotta say, Megan, the way the introductions went in the book, and especially with Miss Carstairs on Barrett's arm, I wouldn't have gleaned that from this situation. To me, it would have been like, so what? How does that mean you're not dating her? You know?
Right, exactly. Like, that does not clarify anything.
So I don't know how the hell Dani was supposed to get all that, because I didn't get it. And then Barrett is just like, well, sleep on it. And he takes off. And then
that's supposed to, like, lead her to some sort of moment of clarity of being like, it all makes sense now.
Yes, that's exactly what it does, because suddenly Dani realizes she has strong feelings for Barrett and really loves him. But,
what?
But he never really explained why he didn't let her know he was back in town, and she doesn't question him on that point. And I personally think that's so sketchy and shitty of him. Like,
okay, it'd be different if he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I was home for 3 days, but I was planning this surprise for you, and I didn't want you to know. Like, I'm so sorry you found out this way. Like, there are ways that it would be acceptable.
I would have even accepted something like, oh my God, I had work to catch up on, or there's this big upcoming horse race that I have to make sure and I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. That would have made sense to me.
I didn't want to split my attention. Like, you were so important to me, and I just wanted to be finished with my work before I could really pay attention to you. Just something. Anything, dude.
Right. Suddenly, he shows up back in the morning to take her sightseeing, because after assaulting her and telling her to sleep on it, sightseeing is what the next step is.
Yeah.
Apparently he loves doing the sightseeing thing, because earlier in the book he took her sightseeing in Louisville, and this time he's taking her sightseeing in Lexington, which is a great place to go sightseeing, but it just didn't make sense to me at this point in the book.
No, I mean, we have both admitted we friggin' love Kentucky.
Yeah.
You can take me sightseeing either one of those places. However, not amidst this kind of garbage relationship stuff.
And he's friendly, but also aloof to her during this little sightseeing adventure. And they legit just spend the whole damn day sightseeing in Lexington. And he's just acting like, what else? No big deal that I ghosted you and then turned up at a party with another woman and then tried to sexually assault you. It's totally cool. And he takes her to a horse auction and tries to encourage her to go back to what she loves and returns to her roots. Oh, okay, that's valid, because I don't think the modeling thing is where it's at. But it's just a weird course of the story. And the two of them talk about how he's been looking out for her as a big brother. That is very specific.
So much that I don't like about these older romance novels.
I'm also like, you just tried to sexually assault her, and now you're like, but I'm just looking out for you like a big brother. It just, dude. So she gets back to her apartment later after this little Lexington soiree adventure and realizes she blew off Marshall. Oops. And he's on the phone wigging out on her. She goes to Marshall's apartment because, oh, by the way, they're in the same apartment complex, of course. So to talk to him in person, she tells him she wants to quit modeling. He reveals he's in love with her and wants to marry her. But she responds with, this kind of threw me too. She doesn't want that lifestyle because they would be constantly going to all these society events all the time, right? Okay, I got that. But Megan, do you know what she really wants in life?
What does she really want in life, Nicole?
It's not the horse racing. She just wants to have a home and babies.
because everything up to this point has shown that that's totally her personality style.
It's totally not her personality, and it is completely came out of left field for me. I'm like, you just decided you wanted to go back to horses. You just had this whole Lexington conversation with Barrett about it, and now you're telling Marshall, I just want to be at home and have babies. Like,
well, like I said in my book, marriage fixes everything. So
I want to be clear for our listeners, too. I do not have a problem with any woman wanting to be a mom or a stay-at-home mom. That's not the point of me having issues with this.
Absolutely not. That is such a valid and needed place for a woman to be. However, if everything leading up to that is indicating...
yeah.
Everything but that sort of thing, it's just a weird transition.
Seriously, and
again, it doesn't mean that if you are a career woman doing horse racing that you can't do the mom thing as well. That's just a very odd transition.
But she
doesn't
all. Tell him anything about wanting to go back to the horsing. It's literally just, I want to be at home and have babies, and it just doesn't align with anything.
But Nicole, she also didn't talk to Barrett about like, oh, you want to push me back into the stream of horses. Actually, what I've decided is that I really want to stay home and have babies. Like, then maybe that transition to telling Marshall that would also make sense. Right, like, if there was some sort of like, hey, I've grown and learned more about myself, and this is what I want now.
Yeah.
Valid. We all learn and grow and decide new things. Very cool. That's just pretty abrupt.
Yeah. It just, at no point did she mention or even hang out with kids or like think kids were cute or like any of that. There was none of that. So yeah. But she does pay Marshall back for his investing in her on the modeling front with all the money she's managed to save up from work. Her plan is to leave the next day to find her dad in New York, and off she goes. 'Cause that totally aligns with wanting to be at home and have babies too. None of this made sense to me. So her and her dad reunite and have a heart-to-heart. Lou has gotten his life back together, and he's proud of her for becoming a lady. But he also understands she needs the horse life and that she's gonna come back to that. Eventually, Barrett shows up. But again, it takes days because Barrett's not a fast-moving guy on this front. He's like, hey, we gotta talk. And she's like, no, we don't. You don't need to worry about me anymore. I'm with my dad now. And Barrett's response is, but we're friends.
But are you?
And her response rightfully is, are you kidding? We're not friends. He makes a pretty weak and shitty apology for how things went right before she left Kentucky. And she asks him to leave her alone, but also admits she loves him. He admits he originally just felt brotherly responsibility for her, but now sees her as a woman. And that she's still in his heart, too. So I will say, there was a nice little gender bender twist around here. She then asked him to marry her.
Oh.
And for the 70s, I thought that was pretty damn forward and fantastic.
That is.
And he says yes. And that's that. That's the end.
Oh, okay. That seems kind of abrupt.
I felt like the whole part where, like, after the sexual assault, I felt like all the rest of that was abrupt and weird and made no sense. But, yeah. I do have a final note regarding this book. So, there are two names in the book. The main character is Danielle, and Barrett's arm candy girlfriend, not girlfriend, Nicole. My name is Nicole Danielle, and my mom once told me she named me after a character in a trashy romance novel. Okay, so this book was published in 1977, and I was born in 1978. And all I have to say, Megan, is I hope to God this was not the book that I was named after. And I'm honestly afraid to ask my mom, because if she tells me it is, I'm going to be really bummed.
But here's the thing. Now we're going to know if your mom listens to the podcast. If she made it all the way to this part. Mimi, is she named after this book? We got to know. Okay, girl. These were not my favorite books, but also not my least favorite. So I feel like all three of the books that I have read so far I would give that author another chance.
Okay.
So I'm not discounting them. Everything has its problems in these books, but I also feel as though there were some positives, and none of them made me totally retch. There are books in this world that have made me just, ugh, I just can't do it again.
Well, if we then, you know, my favorite thing is the Booby Award. I feel like you are probably winning the Booby Prize this time. I have won it the first 2 episodes, so tell me.
You won it the first 2. My Booby Prize is on page 22.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, page 22. This is Judy and Jimmy, and the sentence where the boobies come in. She was totally nude, although only her breasts were clearly visible. Smooth, creamy globes with hard drawn nipples. A freckle shaped like a heart adorned one of them. That's my booby. Mm-hmm.
Mine did not hit until page 29. I
beat ya.
You did. Dani had concealed her hands behind her back to hide the money she still clutched, unaware that the action tightened the thin cotton gown across her front, outlining the upward thrust of her breasts.
Nice.
All right, spicy Scoville.
What do you have for your Scoville? Yeah, I'm going for the habanero. How about you?
Yeah, habanero makes sense for yours, especially with the talk of vortexes and centrifuges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For this one, I'm putting the spicy Scoville scale at poblano with pepper spray because of the attempted assault. Definitely pepper spray that douche canoe, and then poblano because there were some shared kisses here and there. But that was about it.
I feel like my book definitely had pepper spray when we talk about Judy's foray into, you know, the world of sex. That was super inappropriate, but I would even go beyond pepper spray and just be like, that do need to be taken out. Do you have a funny word that came up in your book? We've talked about like scanty and things like that in previous novels. I have a funny word that came up talking about the male anatomy.
Okay.
And in this particular one, Roy looked down at himself and at his tumescence.
Tumescence? I didn't have any unique or interesting words or turns of phrases really in this book. What would you say your romantic reminder is for yours, Megan?
I have 2. So this is Judy saying to Jimmy, I bought you a razor and you can use my toothbrush, she said seductively. So share a toothbrush is apparently sexy.
I disagree strongly with you.
I am actually on your side. I just was a little bit weirded out by the fact that she said we can share a toothbrush seductively. I don't know how that's seductive. Not into it on this side. Ugh. But if you would like to go for a little bit more of an actual romantic thing, Judy says to him a few pages later, by the way, there's a bearskin rug behind the sofa. Why don't you pull it out next to the fireplace?
Okay,
bearskin rugs were a thing for a while, right? Yeah. There's your reminder, folks. You want to get real romantical? Go ahead and grab yourself a bearskin rug and throw it in front of the fireplace.
And if you don't have a fireplace, there are actually videos you can pull up on Netflix and the like that are just like wood-burning fireplaces. So even if you don't have a real fireplace, you can still create that mood.
I feel like most people wouldn't have the bearskin rug, Nicole.
Perhaps just, a fluffy, like, polar fleece blanket or chenille throw or something.
There you go. It's just 2 half-naked bodies laying on a polar fleece in front of their TV.
Hey, we don't kink shame, and that could actually be fun and cute and romantic.
Oh, nice. And how about you? What do you got for your romantic reminder?
I think it's kind of twofold as well. My first romantic reminder would be to find ways to enjoy each other's company and explore the world around you, whether it's sightseeing in Louisville or Lexington, or wherever you happen to live. I think there's something fun about doing that together, you know, trying a local dish or food together on a little date adventure and just kind of seeing the sights and having conversations together to develop more intimacy in your relationship.
That is a really valid point, especially when you think about most of us go through our day kind of ignoring our current surroundings. Like, we'll go on vacation and try all sorts of cool things, you know, the different activities or the museums or the shows. But in our own city, we kind of forget that stuff exists. So playing tourist in your own town with your spouse or your significant other, that's really quite lovely. I like it.
Yeah. And then my secondary one would be, I really loved that Barrett brought pizza over for that day that Dani had the long day at work, and he made a salad and they listened to some records and snuggled, and it was just all about, hey, take a load off, my lady, and let me get you all comfy and feed you food and listen to music, and you just chill and relax and unwind. And I think there's something to be said for that, and maybe finding time to help your partner, if you know they've had a long day or a long week, unwind and do something snuggly and cute like that together and just kind of pamper them a little bit.
Yeah, really taking care of somebody else's needs when you know that they have that overwhelming workload or whatever else happens to be going on.
Or,
yeah, stepping in and just doing that one little extra thing, even though it is something simple, like, I'm going to keep this warm until you're ready to eat it. Yeah, it's very simple and very sweet.
What do we have coming up on our next episode? I'm pretty excited.
Oh, I would love to say I'm excited. I'm a little apprehensive, but we are going into the Thanksgiving season. So we have what is supposedly some holiday romance. I am unsure yet on my novel if it truly is a holiday romance, despite being called A Thanksgiving to Remember. I'm past page 20-25, and they have not mentioned Thanksgiving even once yet, and I feel like that would be something you'd say if it's a Thanksgiving to remember. So we'll see. I'm holding out hope that I might have a holiday here. How about you?
I am super excited. I originally picked a Thanksgiving novel when we were book hunting. I have quickly tossed that one aside. It was not tripping my trigger once I started to read more about it. And I have found something delightful on ebooks called Stuffed, a Thanksgiving romance.
I am so much more excited about yours than mine at this point. There is no way that a book named Stuffed is not better than what I'm reading right now.
I'm pretty excited for it. As soon as I saw the title, I'm like, yep, that's what I'm going to read. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this episode, Megan.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today for Romance on the Rocks. Please like, subscribe, and follow. And if you're a hopeless romantic, fellow bookish biddy like us, think about giving us a review on Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you catch your podcasts. Your support really means the world to us. Until next time, stay safe and know that you're loved.